Well, good morning or good evening, wherever you may be out in the world. I believe it's evening for Dennis, so good evening, Dennis. And thank you for joining us here today on Conversations with Jack. Before we get started, I'd like to go ahead and thank our sponsors, Sommelier Finance, which is the company that I'm building right now. If you want to learn more, go to Sommelier Finance. We're building tooling for liquidity providers on Uniswap. Specifically now, Uniswap v3 as of a couple weeks ago. So that's really exciting. We've got a lot of cool things coming up, but not a lot to share right now. As soon as we have anything to share, and probably right around the Uniswap v3 launch, we'll be doing a show with Zaki Munyon to discuss that, which will be fun. And our other sponsor today, as always, is OmniFlix Media. I just want to thank again Sisla and the team for doing the great work to help keep this show online. This is episode what? I think we might be in the teens, which is exciting. So been at this for a couple months now, and I'm going to keep it going. Today we have Denis Fadeev. Fadeev? I think I mispronounced that. Sorry, Dennis. From the Tendermint team, who is the lead developer on Starport, which is the tool that helps users launch Cosmos chains. It's a really cool tool, and I would encourage users to check it out. We'll go ahead and share some links here. But before we get started talking about Starport, Dennis, do you want to tell me a little bit more about your background and what led you into the Cosmos?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Jack. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Dennis.
So yeah, let me introduce myself. So I'm actually director of developer experience at Tendermint, and yeah, we do work on Starport. I joined Tendermint almost 2 years ago, so it's been a pretty long road. I joined as a front end developer, working on websites, starting on websites, and then we worked on the documentation theme, which is actually now used by almost all big projects in the Cosmos ecosystem, which is pretty cool. And around like a year ago, I started working on Starport. So yeah, my background is mostly front end until I joined Tendermint when it actually became crypto. So
nice. Yeah, we actually worked together at Tendermint for a little while, which was fun. So tell me a little bit about your background before you started working at Tendermint or in crypto. Like, what brought you into this industry?
Sure. So I originally started as a front end developer. I really liked front end because it really allowed me to kind of go from an idea to a working product very quickly, and with like frameworks like Vue.js, for example, it was very straightforward and actually a pleasant experience to prototype things, and that's what I did for most of my career. So I built products for companies, mostly involving web applications, very quickly, and to show like if that works. So if it worked, then it went into production. If it didn't, then I kind of moved on to other proof of concepts. So that was pretty much, I did that for big and small companies. I also did a bit of design. Like when you do prototyping, it's kind of inevitable that you end up like doing wireframes, and like even though I'm not a designer, this is something I did for a while. And then I joined a company which also did actually did decentralized CDN. So they worked on a solution that was peer-to-peer in browser. So like videos would be shared between viewers. So you wouldn't pay for hosting, but the viewers would share video.
Was that WebRTC? Was that WebRTC based?
That was WebRTC based. It is. I mean, it's actually still around. And
what's the name of the company, if you don't mind me asking? That's a cool technology.
Yeah, sure. It's called Teleport Media. So yeah. So I worked there, and actually there I learned about Cosmos SDK and Tendermint because we decided to participate in a hackathon. It was Paris Blockchain Week, and we prepared a pretty cool demo. Everything like went live, streaming, and like using a blockchain. So everything recorded, like transactions between users were recorded on chain using Cosmos SDK. We prepared that in like 3 weeks, and we won first place actually in Paris Blockchain Week, and that's how
cool.
That's how I met Billy, Gautier, Fede, and after that I applied to Tendermint as a front-end developer because that's what I was good at.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's not a huge jump from doing decentralized CDNs to working on Tendermint, so that actually makes a lot more sense. So you started working on front-end development and were originally working on the website, but you very quickly, I remember working with you, you wanted to get your hands dirty with the underlying tech. And tell me how you started working on Starport and sort of like what was the genesis of that and where it started.
Sure. So approximately a year ago, a bit more than that, we wanted to build an application on a blockchain that was either something like Twitter or something like a chat application. So originally it was Twitter, but Twitter-like application. Then we switched to thinking about like more of a Slack Discord type application. And we originally thought that we would use Cosmos Hub as a blockchain, but instead of writing a module, we would actually store all the data in memos on Cosmos Hub. So like we wanted to piggyback on the Cosmos Hub memo support.
Was that what was that called? It was like Flutter?
No, it was called Dither.
Dither, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started helping with that on the front end, but then I realized that like this is really hacky. Like the idea is great, like but I would prefer to actually do it a little bit better, maybe. And Cosmos.network actually says application specific blockchains. So I thought like why not have an application specific blockchain, as it says on the cover, right? Like seems only obvious. I tried doing that. So I investigated like how do we actually build a blockchain, and I started from tutorials and started from documentation. But I actually didn't really like it. Didn't click with me instantly. Like this tech doesn't really. It's not intuitive. Like it wasn't for me at least. So when
At
it
that
actually
point, it definitely wasn't intuitive for anyone, for sure.
Yeah, and I clearly remember because it was like a year ago. Like I looked at Cosmos SDK, right? Like how do I start Cosmos SDK? There's no main. There's no place to start it, right? Then I looked at Gaia, and it had a place to start, but it didn't have a place to like add modules, right? So like where do I add modules? There is no X directory. There is no example of anything. And name service tutorial is very big tutorial, right? So to go from beginning to end, you had to actually spend a lot of time doing that. So I first thing I did is scaffold with Cosmos Scaffold, but the problem with that, like it was very cool, but the problem I had is that it actually didn't build, right? Like the experience wasn't great in that you had to modify a bunch of files to get it up and running. And when it actually clicked is when I went through Scavenge tutorial, and I actually used that as a base. But what I wanted is I wanted a way to scaffold like a chain where I didn't have to replace every mention of scaffold with something else because it took like 50 replacements. So I thought we could do better by using template. I didn't really actually like the Go template. I didn't know Go at all back then, so I had to actually start learning Go at the same time. And so the first thing I did is like let's scaffold the chain with a name replaced with the name that I want, right? If I want to build a blog, let's scaffold it with name blog and replace everything, have everything mention blog. And the next thing that confused me is how do you actually write data onto your chain? Like that was the next big question. I couldn't figure this out. Like really, what I wanted is like an implement a simple blog, right? Like with Rails,
Yeah.
the canonical example is a blog. So how do you do blog in Cosmos SDK? But it wasn't really obvious to me at all. So when I figured that out, this was like eureka moment for me. Like, yeah, Cosmos SDK, I know it now. Now I can do everything. As soon as I can write a string to a chain, it feels like it can do anything from there. And so this was the second part of the original kind of Starport, is scaffolding something that writes a string to a chain and lets you delete this something. So that was like the foundation for the type command, and the last part was like Starport serve, because the initial process was very cumbersome. After each change you had to kill processes, because it was pre-Launchpad, so it had two processes you had to kill, and then you had to rerun the init script. So it was very kind of the feedback loop was
Onerous.
very big. And I wanted to streamline that, so that's where Starport Serve came from. Text changes and automatically restarts the chain.
This makes me want to rebuild my blog on top of a Starport chain.
Well, yeah, now we can do that with 2 commands, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. A lot of the ideas that you're talking about, like, Marco and I kind of worked on Scaffold initially, and like what you ended up building was what we kind of aspired to do. But I think we both kind of ended up getting caught up in random infrastructure stuff and never really built that functionality out. And what you've done with Starport is like beyond anything that I had imagined, like looking at the Go templating and like, oh man, are we going to have to like parse this abstract syntax tree to do like message adding effectively? And like, you've been able to implement all of those features like very quickly and easily. And the CLI wrapper you have is wonderful to use, which is one of the things that's been most fun for me to watch with your demos and when I played with it. And it's the go-to way that I suggest people check out the SDK. I just like it's, if we're going to have a build your own blockchain platform, you need something like Starport to help users make it. And I think there's a big milestone that the Cosmos ecosystem hit today of $100 billion in assets under management on Cosmos chains. And I think that 2 years ago when we launched the hub and we started talking about, man, what would be a wild number? Like that was a number that came up, and we've hit that today, which is exciting. But Dennis, you were saying that the number that's in your mind is, how do we have 1 million Cosmos chains? And Starport is the way to get there.
Yes, I think it's very important to lower the barrier to entry as much as possible, because the more people can start building with Cosmos SDK, the more cool new things we will have in the ecosystem. So that's pretty awesome. And I wanted to make the experience of building with Cosmos SDK similar to what front-end developers have with Vue and with React, right? So it became really simple and straightforward to start building, and everyone started doing that. So yeah, I think also there's an interesting kind of discussion about a chain versus smart contract. So is it really that different? And like, can we consider chains to be new smart contracts, right? If it's very easy to build, if it's easy to deploy, if it's easy to launch, right? So both chains and smart contracts encapsulate logic, right? And if
they're state machines.
Yeah, and it's just a different level of abstraction, right? Like smart contracts is a bit higher level, chains are a bit lower level, but they're virtually the same thing if you think about it. So if we make it as simple as possible to launch chains, many people prefer it to writing smart contracts because of the benefits that sovereign chains give you that smart contracts can never provide, right? So lower gas costs and ability to have your own governance and not depend on anyone. So yeah, this is very important, I think.
So, that makes me think of a few things. You're talking about front end development quite a bit, and that's definitely your background. And I think that one of the key features that Starport has is pre-built front end tooling that you can load up in a web browser and immediately start working on the chain. Talk to me a little bit more about that, because when you started on front end development, it was really the dark old days of Amino and like it being really, really hard. And Starport as a tool has sort of bridged this gap between the pre-Stargate world and the post-Stargate world. Yeah, talk to me a little bit about that transition and how front-end development in Cosmos has changed over the last year or so.
Sure. So I think the front-end component was actually one of the kind of killer features of Starport and continues to be. Not only because this is something almost any developer needs, right? So you want to build your chain, but you also want to provide UI for your end users. But another benefit that may be overlooked by many is that it actually provides a way for a developer to learn how it works under the hood, right? So when you scaffold your type, right, the CRUD operations, it's very useful to see it in your browser, right? To like play with it, to send a transaction.
I think so.
To see how it works, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just a CLI, and you don't know how to transfer all of this into a browser. Well, it will most likely end up being. So that was the first thing I decided to add, because like when you scaffold a type, it's just one command more to actually scaffold a component that is responsible for like scaffolding a very simple form. Similarly, again, to Rails, which like was the inspiration, one of the inspirations for Starport, right? It scaffolds a CRUD form for you that you can then modify according to your needs. So the initial web scaffold was very simple, right? It didn't even have token send component. It just had like sign in and this CRUD form, and that was it. But of course, over time we changed it, massively re-engineered everything, and now it's almost a separate project called Starport Interface, which is comprised of three parts, right? One is like when you start building your front end application, what you want is data management layer, right? So that we provide with Starport Vuex. You want visual components, so you don't have to implement everything from scratch, from sign in to token send. And this is Starport View components. And the last bit is like if you're building your own chain, most likely it has a bunch of custom modules that implement your logic, right? And all of this has to be exposed to the front end. So what we do, and I think this is absolutely amazing feature that we released a couple of weeks ago, is that we intelligently scaffold, we generate code for all your custom modules in TypeScript, JavaScript, and Vuex. So whenever you add something to your proto file, it immediately changes your Vuex modules. So if you add a new message type, you instantly are able to send messages from browser without working with like codecs, anything. It's just like one command to send a message, and yeah, you can start building your front end application with it.
Wow, I didn't realize that you guys had that feature. I need to I need to talk to my front end guys about this. One other question that I've heard folks ask about is Keplr integration, and I know that using the suggest wallet feature is definitely something that could be done with these Starport chains. Is that a feature you guys are going to be shipping here in the near future?
Well, Keplr integration is already merged into develop. We haven't released it to the public, but
cool.
it's already there. It works awesome. Just one click, you got your Keplr wallet, and you can sign transactions, do everything you want. And we are planning on adding other ways to sign in, besides like importing mnemonic, which is like the most basic. maybe eventually with Ledger.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's really exciting. A lot of very cool things there. So just looking over at the chat, we do have quite a few questions, and I'd like to say that we are going to go ahead and get to those questions. One that just jumps out here is Pramod asks, can developers use Starport and IBC to build blockchain backends for Web 2 legacy applications? I'm going to go ahead and answer that yes, but Dennis, if you'd like to chat a little bit more about that.
Well, sure. Of course, you can build your blockchain, and let's say you have this like Web 2.0 application. It can interact with your blockchain, and your front end application can also interact with it. So it's like, of course, you can combine them and make like a hybrid application where some of the logic is centralized because you don't necessarily need to decentralize everything, right? So you can like store some data on a database. You can have keys on your traditional backend that will like interact with your blockchain. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cosmos SDK Cosmos SDK blockchains have quite a few different interfaces to interact with. So you can like talk through gRPC, or you can make HTTP requests. So it's all very straightforward, I think, and kind of Starport makes it even easier.
Awesome. That's a great question. So another topic in the kind of front end in Cosmos world, I'm going to start it off by saying this week, Tendermint, where Dennis is the director of developer experience, bought or acquired the company bHarvest, which is the primary developer behind the Gravity decentralized exchange that's going to be launching here on the hub soon. I do know that bHarvest had an existing front end that was sort of basic and, just able to use the basic DEX functionality. But I also know that Dennis and his team are working on a new front end for the Gravity Dex that will be available when it launches. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that project and how that's going?
Yeah, sure. So we decided to build the interface for the DEX called Navigator using Starport interface, just to share as much code as possible and to kind of bring all the developments that we make in Navigator world back to Starport users. So I think that would be very cool because, and we also will heavily utilize the code generation that Starport provides. So for example, liquidity module, which powers Gravity Dex, has a bunch of Cosmos SDK messages and queries and all of this. So instead of writing all this by hand in Vuex, we just press a button and Vuex modules are automatically generated.
Okay, so real quick, I'm going to need to do that soon. Where do I go to do that?
So you, I mean, it's already pre-generated, but if you do it from scratch, essentially you clone github.com Tendermint liquidity, and then you run Starport serve, no. And it regenerates.
I have a module. Code. I have a module where I need to generate code for the prototypes.
Yeah. So
the stuff that I'm working on for Sommelier.
Yeah, sure. So you create a config YAML and you add 3 lines of code: client, Vuex, path, whatever, like wherever you want to generate JavaScript, and then you run Starport serve. And it's actually in the docs, so I can send you a link how to do it.
Cool. I will go ahead and check that out. I'm really excited about that piece of it, and I know that. Yeah. So sorry for interrupting you. You were talking about the Gravity Dex.
No, that was actually one of the reasons why we decided to use Starport interface for that, because all the existing components and Vuex modules that we either have or can automatically generate, because like if something changes in the liquidity module, instead of like tracing all the changes and like making changes in Vuex manually, we just rerun the command and it generates the code for us. I think that's perfect because we can make sure that nothing is left out and there are no mistakes.
I mean, these code generation workflows, like, this is a slightly technical topic, and I'm sure some viewers are like snoozing now. But for folks like Dennis and I, switching to these proto files in switching to this world where we can generate a lot of code from these models makes our lives a lot easier and makes these really complex systems that we build much more maintainable, and able to be built by much smaller teams, which is really cool. So that's awesome. All right, so we're kind of coming up towards the end here. So I do see a few questions. Um, Somebody's asking, can I talk about Sommelier? So I was sort of alluding to Sommelier a little bit with Dennis earlier. Um, Sommelier right now, we're going to be building tooling for liquidity providers on Uniswap v3. The big difference between Uniswap v3 and Uniswap v2 is that on v3, you have to provide liquidity in a specified range. And this major change ends up making Uniswap v3 a lot more like a traditional order book, where you have to actively manage where you're using your liquidity to market make, essentially. This takes away the fungibility of those pool shares and makes it a really substantially different system. So the protocol that we're building over at Sommelier uses the Gravity bridge, which is the bridge to and from Ethereum, to allow the Cosmos-based chain to manage these positions over on Ethereum. And essentially what we're going to be offering to users is the same experience that they got out of Uniswap v2. So in Uniswap v2, you put your liquidity in and you kind of can forget about it. And you provide liquidity across the whole range. That pool share is fungible and you can sell it or, put it into something like YFI and do yield farming on it. In that same way, the pool shares in Sommelier will be fungible tokens. And what's happening in the background there is that the chain is ingesting a lot of information about what's going on in Uniswap right now, and it's moving the liquidity that's managed by the chain in the band. And yes, so Jeff, that it is a lazy LP made possible by Cosmos. As an initial set of products, when Uniswap v3 launches on the 5th, we're going to have the ability to add liquidity and trying to abstract and then using data that we have in the back end to try to abstract away some of the complexities of adding funds in v3. And that's what we're going to launch with on the 5th. The chain is coming a month or two later. We do have some development still there. As Dennis very well knows, some of these blockchain modules can take a little bit longer than anticipated, because once you deploy them, they're much harder to change, and there's real money flowing through these systems. And the front ends that Dennis builds are relatively easy to change. And while they do handle users' funds, with something like Keplr, you can really offload a lot of that fund management to the ledger, and there's a lot less room to make huge errors that are going to cost people millions of dollars. So the Gravity Dex, probably in about, we're going to see these testnets here soon. There was just a governance proposal. The Gravity Bridge, we've had a series of testnets. We're working through some audit as well as actual issues that we've identified in the testnets, doing a major refactor. We should see that soon. But once we have the Gravity Bridge really solidified, the other two modules on top, Starport is going to make those a lot easier for us to do, which is exciting. Okay, so wow, Jeff has a lot of Sommelier questions. Are there any questions for Dennis? I'm going to go ahead and answer one more of these Sommelier questions. Is there going to be a SOM token to incentivize liquidity? Yes, there will be a SOM token. And fees will be paid in Atom. No, Sommelier is going to be an independent chain, and fees will likely be paid in SOM token. And how can we build on Sommelier? So right now, you're not going to really be able to build on Sommelier for a little while. We do need to have the core modules done, and then we're going to allow users to start building on Sommelier. Features like users being able to implement their own strategies, people who are creating pools, reaping the benefits of those pools, like these are the types of things that we'll be adding after the initial proof of concept. But all of that is really exciting. All right, well, Denis, we're coming up on a half an hour here. Any last shout outs or things that you want to talk about?
Well, I just wanted to say that you can right now start building chains that may potentially interface with Sommelier through IBC, right? So I
Absolutely.
think that's a good time to start building chains and connecting them with IBC, with Sommelier or Cosmos Hub or any other chain in the ecosystem.
Oh, I have one question, Denis, that I'm very excited about. There's an upcoming Gravity Dex testnet. Will I be able to move tokens via IBC over to the Gravity Dex testnet and trade them on the Dex?
Uh, yes, I think so. I would have to check on that, but probably, I don't know.
I think, this is one of the things that I'm really excited is to start using real funds and testnets with IBC. So I really hope that this feature is enabled on the Gravity testnet, and I'm looking forward to giving it a try.
Yeah, I hope so too, because it's very exciting to start like moving atoms somewhere else or like moving new tokens to Cosmos Hub. Yeah, you can do it right now, which is very exciting. Like IBC is live. Not many people still kind of aware of how exciting this is and like how many possibilities that actually opens. But yeah, very excited about that.
Yeah, we've got now IrisNet and then Akash as of tomorrow. Oh, well, actually tonight, I'm doing that upgrade this evening, will be IBC enabled. Um, and I think the Sentinel mainnet, and there's a couple more that are right around the corner. So seeing some real IBC enabled decentralized exchange here within the next like week. Pretty excited about that one, not gonna lie. Cosmonauts, thank you again for joining us today. And Denis, thank you very much for taking the time this evening to sit down with me and chat a bit more about Starport and the work that you're doing over at Tendermint. If anyone wants to see Denis, Denis is on Twitter. What is your Twitter handle, Denis?
My last name, Fadeev.
Nice. Go check out Denis on Twitter for more updates on Starport, as well as all of the cool stuff he's working on. And before we wrap today, I do want to say one last thank you to our sponsors, Sommelier Finance, which we talked quite a bit about today in today's episode, and OmniFlix Media. Thanks again to Sisla and the team for producing this, and I really enjoy working with you. And for the folks who don't know, OmniFlix Media is a blockchain management platform for large volumes of media assets. I would really encourage that folks go check out omniflix.network to learn more about that system. All right. Well, next week, I think that our guest is going to be Tess Rierson, the VP of Engineering at Interchain Berlin, to talk about Tendermint engineering and some of the core work going on there. Looking forward to seeing you all then, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks and goodbye.